But thank you all so much for joining us for Resume and Cover Letter Best Practices. We're going to discover the latest best practices for resume and cover letter writing. And this is led by Kelli Hrivnak, the founder of Knak Digital, a boutique recruitment firm that specializes in identifying and matching technology, digital marketing, and creative talent with hyper-growth businesses. Kelli is a leader with over 15 years of experience in staffing and recruitment services. Throughout her career, she has partnered with a large variety of companies, from Fortune 500 corporations to startups. Her extensive background in the technology and marketing industry has provided her with valuable insights she looks forward to sharing with job seekers. And I want to give a shout out to Bob McIntosh over at Mass Hire Lowell, who recommended Kelli to speak to our group. So without any further ado, will all 75 plus of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Kelli for joining us this afternoon. And Kelli, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right, fantastic. Robert, thank you so much for the warm introduction, and thank you for inviting me to take some time here to provide my own experiences and insights about resume and cover letter best practices. So I put some slides together here, but I would welcome anybody, if while I'm presenting, if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, feel free to drop them in the chat or QA, and I'll try and keep my eyes on that while I'm working through my slides and address any questions that come up during the presentation. So certainly want to make sure that this is valuable and relevant to everybody in the audience, while kind of giving just a very general guidance and approach to resume writing and cover letters. So let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. Thanks again, Robert. Let's see. Hopefully I can get this to work here. All right, fantastic. I won't take up too much time here. I know Robert had quickly introduced who I am, and again, recruiter, talent advisor. So I partner with different organizations to basically help them identify, source, and help with the recruitment process. So I've had a fair share of experiences working with a number of different types of hiring managers, different organizations. I'm personally headquartered in a little bit outside in the burbs in the DC, Baltimore metro area. So have worked with a variety of different industries ranging from government, nonprofit, fintech, marketing, advertising. Tried to figure out how many resumes I've looked at during my recruitment career and came up with a rough number of over 40,000 resumes. I have a feeling that number might be a little bit higher. Have interviewed and screened over thousands of applicants, helped with interview preparation, salary negotiation. So I've had my fair share of exposure in that recruitment process to provide, again, just my own experiences of what that's looked like so I can pass them on to you to help you with your current job search. See if I can get this to move. So here, what we're going to cover, and I've worked in a couple different areas here, but first what I would like to talk about is in general, just resume writing. And then I'll move on to cover letters. And again, any questions that you have during the presentation, just drop them in the chat. I'll keep my eye on it over here. And let me, so I'm going to start with resume writing. And I think there's a couple different aspects when I think about resume writing. And, first it's going to be the formatting, and I'm going to talk about that at the tail end of resume writing. What I want to focus on the most, and I think what I see process-wise, is when people start thinking about putting a resume together, and whether that's you have a resume and you're adding on to that, is people think about formatting and picking up a template and plugging and playing into that. And really, I think my number one tip when it comes to resume writing, before you agonize over what template and updating, is to really, if you're starting from scratch, is to really sit down and take a quick self-assessment and brain dump as far as, again, if you're starting from scratch, what companies that you've worked at. If you're starting with most recent, really start thinking about the projects that you've completed, the new skills that you've developed, the certifications, and just it's almost like a brainstorming session. I mean, I hate to handwrite anything, so I'm a big, type everything up. But if you get out a piece of paper and just start writing down, just in general, everything that you've done most recently, and this can certainly apply to when you have to update a resume as well. Um, and part of this is really working through the clarity process. And I think altogether, and I cannot stress this enough as a first step in just a job search process itself, is clarity is so important before you start anything else in the job search, whether that be reaching out to your network, updating your marketing collateral, which includes a cover letter, a resume, your online presence, because you really need to understand where you've been, what your growth has looked like as far as how you moved from one job to the next, and what you did during that time to kind of bridge those gaps moving forward. Take a look at your own strengths. I mean, it's important if you're mid-career and kind of figuring out, well, listen, I don't really like doing this task, or this is, not something that I fully enjoy, but also kind of taking a look at your strengths and determining, well, wow, like, I'm really great at this particular area, or I really enjoy mentoring others. And think about, not only the things that spark joy per se, but things that you're really excellent at. And when you're thinking about career growth, what type of roles that you're going to pursue in elevating those strengths as well. And part of this process is, again, leading into your personal branding, which, I know that this comes up a lot, and I'm sure you've heard personal branding, which can feel kind of icky. Really, what that means is it's your area of expertise, what makes you different from everybody else, right? So this is what's going to stand out in a sea of applicants and resumes. When you have 20 different people that a hiring manager is looking at, they want to understand what makes you different. And of course, hopefully that difference aligns exactly to the company and the position. So when we're thinking about what exactly that could mean, is take a look at the projects that you've completed. What industries have you been serving? I'm thinking, in DC here, if you're looking for a role in the government, people want to see the type of government experience that translates. Pharma, fintech, a lot of the highly regulated organizations where you could leverage some of that industry experience. Take a look at that and think if that's going to be leverage in the type of jobs that you're targeting moving forward. Also, of course, hard skills are great. I think especially because I work in marketing and tech, where tech is changing often. Of course, keeping up with those hard skills. Particular training that you might have completed to stay fresh and up to date, different methodologies. I know it's hard sometimes to see where your strengths are. You live, how you live your life. It might be very difficult to understand where your strengths are. And I think my biggest tip is talk to the people around you. I know that I've personally gained clarity in talking to former bosses, and for them to really highlight, well, you know what, this is what you're really great at, or do you remember when we were working on a project together and this is what you did to make the project come through? So if you need some help in really gaining some clarity around this, talk to the people who know you best, who have worked with you professionally, and you might be able to brainstorm and find some ideas here around clarity and skills. I did just see a question around hard skills. So, and it's kind of a silly way of how this has been defined as hard versus soft. Hard skills I see, and again, I'm relaying this to the tech environment, but this could be software skills, coding, thinking about marketing skills or technical proficiencies that you might have, which sometimes seem more relevant as far as if you see job requirements that require, particular hard skills or technical acumen, tech skills. Soft skills are going to be more of those, I guess you could say, almost personality traits. So it could be great communication skills, active listening, problem solving, critical thinking is more on the soft skill side of it, which I'll get into a little bit later as far as how, and both of those are very important in both jobs, of course, or positions, depending upon what they're looking for. I would like to get into a little bit about how we define that in resumes. Let me move on to the next slide here. Yes, I saw a question about column style, and I'll get into formatting. This is actually leading into just the generic formatting is how you're formatting the content on your resume. And so I have seen there's chronological. There's also, mixed formatting where, sometimes you're combining a little bit of the functional resume, which I didn't give an example here, but I will advise everyone that, and this is usually consensus in the recruitment community, while there are some recruiters that can recognize and appreciate the functional resume, I would highly recommend following the chronological formatting, which is shown here, just because, and I hate to say is you have to dumb it down to the recruiter is typically something that they see that this is a very common way to format it. So it's easier to consume, if that makes sense. So I would highly recommend following the chronological formatting, which is going to look and how I highlight it here as far as starting with your contact information, an intro or summary, the bulk of the experience, which would be the experience, followed by education and skills. So this is a very generic, just chronological formatting. Again, there's a couple different formattings available for more senior level professionals, career pivoters. Happy to talk about it at the end if somebody feels that is not, maybe if they have questions around different formatting that they've seen or used, and if that might be beneficial to their search. So let me move on to next. So I'm going to start breaking down the different sections of the resume. I'm going to start with the intro, which was typically, many years ago, I was seeing a lot as far as like an objective statement. I think that an objective statement at this point is a little bit less modern than what I'm finding in a resume. And the reason for it is an objective is really telling an employer what you're looking for out of a role. And, to be quite frank, is a company and the hiring manager wants to take a look at, how are you going to be and add value to our organization? So a better way of doing this, instead of an objective of I'm trying to use my skills to fulfill whatever dream I have, let's think about how we can position ourselves as a solution to the company. So a great way when we hear about talking about customizing your resume, first, I would like to say I am not a fan of or see even the necessity of having to customize a resume for every single job that you're applying to. I do believe that you might have a base resume. Now, if you're looking at a couple different career paths, for instance, like a project manager or a strategist, you might have two different resumes for two different types of job titles that will be highlighting the different experiences are more relevant to a project manager or a strategist, but there should be no need for you to have to be customizing every single resume for every application, because you really shouldn't be targeting a really large variety of roles. So that being said, when I'm thinking about customizing, the best place to do this is at the intro of a summary. So you can position yourself with the job title of the role that you're targeting. So for this instance, I gave an example of a project manager. And so on the left is a very generic breakdown of how you can kind of figure out how to put content in to specialize and really tailoring that resume to the role. So for instance, the breakdown being a summary, I just titled the summary IT project manager. So if you're positioning yourself as a project manager, put the job title right in the summary, because the hiring manager is going to take a look at that and say, oh, look, project manager, that's the role, check the box. Along with that, maybe include about just 2 to 5 sentences that includes maybe any specific information, any unique information that shows prior experience that is relevant to your experience as a project manager. Again, I used, depending, and I can get into ageism a little bit. If you want to write 10 years of experience, that's great. Sometimes I think for my senior level professionals, when we are labeling 20 plus years of experience, unfortunately, ageism is alive and well. So I would probably steer away from adding anything that 15 to 20 years of experience, unless the position requires that. Academia, government, there are some requirements where years of experience is a necessity. So other than that, you can use other information. Here I highlighted 2 different projects that you can include in the project management that, again, shows immediate achievements that is going to be interesting and really capture somebody's attention. I'm going to move on to the next one. I did see a question regarding how far back do you go in a resume. Let me get to that with the experience section, because that's a great question. So let me kind of talk about the experience section in general, and then I'll talk a little bit about how you want to present that in a resume, of course, given if you do have more than 20 years of experience. The experience section personally is where the magic happens. As much as, and listen, I am just one recruiter, and I advise you to talk to other recruiters in terms of how they're looking at resumes, because there is nuance, there are no absolutes, which is, I hope, your takeaway from this. But I would like to share that I personally love to go to the experience section because I'm looking for context. And I think it's very common, I see resumes where they have tons of keywords and maybe a lot of task written generic information in a resume. I'm looking for, again, that unique value proposition, right? So what makes you different from everyone else? So in an experience section, what I tend to see is almost a lot of experience sections where it looks like people have copied and pasted their job description and then put it right under their experience section. So listen, that's a start. I'm all for that. It shows, what you were needed for that job. What we need to be thinking about, and again, what makes you different, is what happened after you completed some of these tasks. So I gave a couple examples here in terms of, what that really looks like and how to upgrade those task written resume bullets. For instance, right here, upload, maintain, optimize website content. Okay, that's great, right? Again, that's very task driven. Now, how can we make that a little bit more specific in terms of the results? Is I added adhering to SEO best practices that drove a 32% increase in traffic for environmental nonprofits. So again, I love metrics. I love anything that you can measure as far as results. If you have any numbers that you can put into the experience section, I know given whatever role that you might have, that's not always attainable. There are different ways to think about quantifying. And again, happy to take a look at any examples that you might have too. Even if you're managing a team, right? How many people did you manage? If you don't have exact numbers, can you use descriptive words like increase or decrease? So there's different ways to kind of just show impact if you don't have access to specific numbers. Again, working in tech, especially in digital marketing, where their livelihood is going over, analytics and analyzing the impact of campaigns, there's no excuse for why certain roles should not be including those numbers. And kind of getting into that again and getting into that thinking beyond just the task written, I think, I advise people when they are auditing their resume is to take a look at the experience section and take a look at every bullet point and think about, what happened after that, or so what? And personally, I would love to maybe just see 3 bullet points under experience section that actually show results, as opposed to 10 just task written bullet points, because again, that's showing me more impact in terms of what you did with the business. So think about it if you can, if you're going through your resume and taking a look at each line item, to think about, what kind of impact, or why was I hired, and what happened after I did that task. A format, and I'm sure if anybody has had any access to thinking about writing, there is a format. Some people call it STAR. I see CAR, SAR. There's a lot of acronyms out there, but really the gist of how you're formatting these experiences, and also this parlays over into interviewing too. So just a key here is, I know that this could be, this right here, this in terms of determining those results is going to be the largest haul of your resume writing. If you even outsource and decide to hire a resume writer, a good resume writer is going to walk you through this process and should be asking you these questions. So, given if you take this on yourself, look for a partner to help you. This is going to be the most difficult part of your resume writing, in addition to the clarity part. So, take some time, think about it a little bit, but it really will make an impact in not only a great resume, but when you go to interview, this is going to give you context in the conversations that you're having during your interview process. So highly advised just to take some time, if you have some time to do it, to just think about, I think a key for me too is if you ever are having meetings with your management, whether that's quarterly performance reviews, if you're going over, what you've done, take that time. It's a good time to update your resume if you're going through those numbers and achievements, to update your resume, or at least keep a running book that highlights these achievements as it's happening in real time moving forward. So this process becomes a little bit easier. I know we had talked about soft and hard skills, and I would just like to back up to is sometimes when I'm seeing resumes, I do see summaries where they're filled with a lot of soft skills, right? And again, thinking about soft skills is I'm a team-driven player that has great communication skills and works well in a collaborative environment. Those are great things, but I think when we, as a recruiter, and a lot of that is vetted out during the interview process, but if you can take those really high-level soft skills and give it context, in the experience section, especially communication skills, because communication skills can look, in a variety of different ways, right? From active listening, verbal, written, anything that you can do specifically to highlight how that looks as far as communication skills or whatever soft skills. Think about how you can elaborate on that a little bit in the experience section. One more thing too, and sorry, I'm talking so much about experience section, but again, I think it's such an important part of the resume where you should really be spending a lot of time and providing a lot of information. It's also thinking about unique details that you can infuse in the experience section as well. One thing that I do like to see if you're able and you don't have any NDAs is to include any customer, client, vendors, any company information or partnership information that you can share in here really stands out. I mean, if a competitor sees that you worked with, Marriott and they're a hospitality firm, that could be interesting to them. So any kind of industry experience or that you've had experience working with a competitor would be highly attractive to certain hiring managers. So any information that you can put in there. Again, industry is important. I see a lot of people skip over including the industries, which also to include too in your experience section, if you are working for a company that is not a well-known brand, whether that be, Amazon or a Fortune 500, if it's a small business, which is an area that I specialize in, is startups and small businesses, I have been telling a lot of people that I'm working with to include a really short descriptor under the company name that describes who the company is and what they specialize in. So then again, you're dumbing it down for the recruiter and the hiring manager. It gives them less work if they're able to read what the company does to, again, provide context. What else did I miss here? And again, I think I talked about making any experience measurable. Again, I think somebody had said, what if we don't have numbers here? So maybe using increase, decrease in terms of sales, or just, of course, any kind of revenue that you have increased for the organization is great. Satisfied customers. Again, it depends upon the type of role that you have too. So I'm happy to maybe talk about how you can translate those different measurable experience statements to, again, provide a little bit more impact here. And I know that I think I've come up with career breaks, and actually let me address, because I know there were questions about how much experience should you show if you're over 20 years of experience, and talking about resume length as well, which I think I was going to get into later, but let me address it now. I personally, you don't need a one-page resume. You don't need a two-page resume. Honestly, from what I believe, there is no magic number when it comes to the perfect, length of a resume. What I will tell you is content is king, and just make sure that the information is necessary, relevant, and concise. So for my senior level professionals, it's going to be really hard to keep that to a 1-page. I'm okay with a 3-page resume. What I will advise is, as you are tacking on more experience to the resume, a misstep that I see is people will keep adding the experience, but they're not editing their prior experience. And as some of that experience becomes a little bit outdated, I would highly advise you can do 2 different things. Is certainly to go in, take a look at the experience section with the bullet points of your dated experience and start cutting that back. Whether you keep that to 1, if it starts becoming, beyond 20, I've even seen people label a section where it says other professional experience. And you can maybe just include the dates that you worked there along with the company and the title, to really condense that to help keep the resume length but also relevancy too. So again, just make sure that as you're adding more experience, that you are condensing that prior experience on your resume. Okay, and then just a couple more things to add about the resume. So we talked about experience section. Of course, I would advise, unless you're entry level, just getting out of school or making a career pivot, then the education should be included closer to the bottom of the resume. As far as adding skills, certifications, I would also include that after the education. References. So references, there should be absolutely no need to include any mention or lists of references on the resume. References are available upon request. There's no need for that. Companies, I would think would ask you for those references, so it's really just irrelevant to put on the resume. I don't know if there's any special industries that would really require you to add those references to the resume, but and thinking of it from a privacy standpoint, if you're listing your references with their phone numbers and email address, you don't know where your resume is going and you don't know who might be reaching out to these people. So it's really important that you maintain control of who's contacting these references, so then you can prep your references for when whoever might be reaching out to them, but also that they're not being bombarded with who knows who calling them. So just important here to keep the references off the resume. I'm not sure if I did mention this too, but contact information as well. Typical standard is include your name, your email. Some people are including their LinkedIn account, which is fine. If it's not there, I'll go look for it anyways. But I would say to keep your street address off of the resume, just for privacy concerns. There's no need that any company would need your street address from a resume. City and town, absolutely. That's important if they're looking to understand if you're local and it does require an in-office presence. But again, no need for an actual street address on your resume. And also something that's optional too, definitely include any volunteer opportunities that you've been actively involved in. Sometimes these can be extremely relevant in terms of the type of roles that you're applying to. So feel free to include any volunteer activities here. Hobbies, I can go either way with it. There's different opinions here as far as hobbies, and I think it really depends on the hiring manager. Some say that there could be some bias involved in terms of what you might include there. There could be some discrimination in terms of what hobbies you include here. It's hard for me to give a yes or no on this one. So I would say do what you feel is best, and it could depend upon the type of role and the type of hobbies that you're listing. I'll leave it at that. Cell phone number, yes, please include your cell phone number on your resume. So, funny story is I can't tell you how many times I've been scrambling to get, to schedule an interview, and I'm looking for the phone number and it's not on the resume. So while there's some application systems where you're putting the resume into putting your phone number into the ATS system, please put your cell phone on the resume. People are calling. I know emails, yes, that's great, but please, and if you're worried about privacy for your cell phone number, I do know Google Voice will give you a pseudo cell phone account if you're with just like a particular cell phone dedicated to the job search. But yes, I am team put your number on your resume. All right, let me talk about formatting. So resume formatting, Canva, which I love. It's what I made this deck with. Canva has been the culprit in a lot of these resumes that are fancy and overly designed, and they'll include a headshot and leave not a lot of room for content. So I am very old school as a recruiter who is constantly going through, and there are other recruiters who are going through a lot more of a higher volume than me. I am looking for content and information. I am not looking for pretty designs. I am not looking for pretty text tables. I want to find information that is going to tell me if you are potentially a fit for the job. So what I love, no columns. First of all, columns are taking up a lot of space in your resume. When you're splitting your resume down in half, it really makes it difficult to fit in a lot of the information. I'm not going to pass on a resume because of their formatting. I just think as far as if you're trying to clarify your information, no columns, a straight Google Doc that has the format that I talked about as far as name, summary, experience, just kind of following that format where it's very clean, concise. Really, it's about readability here. And I think the only exception to the design and aesthetic of a resume is because I do work in the creative field. There are creatives designers who are hiring for design who do take the accountability of how they designed a resume into effect. Other than that, if you're not in the creative field, I would really try and focus on just making sure that you're focusing on the content in your resume, that it's clean, easy to read. PDF, Word, most ATS systems should be able to, and I've worked with a variety of them, where you're downloading a PDF or Word, most ATS systems should be able to parse both documents. Most modern ATS systems should be able to parse both documents. So, if the fallback is Word, I would go with Word. A PDF, again, should be okay. I would say if you are emailing, I would prefer to see a PDF just because nobody can go in and change any of the material in that. So if you are emailing a resume, PDF is great. My fallback is Word, likely for application systems, but again, they should be accepting PDF documents. Photo on a resume, I am team no. Now the US, in the United States, and I'm assuming most of the audience here is either applying or is in the United States, we should not be using photos on resumes. There is some pushback here is that it can be subject to discrimination if you're including your photo. There are some, I think, exceptions here where if it's in social media, or maybe some creative fields, or if we're looking at auditioning to be an actor where it requires a headshot. I mean, if a headshot is required in the job description, that's fine. Otherwise, again, you're taking up valuable real estate on your resume. And again, there's the subject matter that you could be open for discrimination. So I would advise against using a photo. If you're using a template where it has a field for photo, just delete it. If you are using any template that has a field for whatever we had talked about, you don't need to put your information in there. It's as simple as deleting or finding a better template for yourself. And also, again, talking about the resume is how are you, I think when we're talking about customizing too, is just make sure in your resume that you are addressing all of the requirements of the job that you're applying to. So I don't know if I have anybody in the audience who's in UX or design. I pulled this example here, but it's really relevant to how you break down a job description. And so, of course, taking a look at the required skills. So in here, a couple examples that I gave that you want to make sure that you're addressing in the resume. It showed knowledge of user research methodologies, usability principles. So you want to make sure that you're including that in there. Also, something highlighted here again is ed tech industry is preferred. If you have that experience, make sure that that is being said in the resume, right? So just going through the job requirements and making sure that the resume speaks to the requirements. The must-haves, I mean, those are added bonuses, but the requirements are really important to make sure that you're addressing in a resume, if that makes sense. Right, let me move on. I do want to talk about ATS. I know it comes up a lot in my my community and a couple other recruiter AMAs that I've hosted. I just want to breeze through this really quickly. An ATS is, if you, for example, are going to apply to a job, is the centralized software system that companies are using. The best way to use this is a filing storage cabinet, right? So it's where you're applying your resume, but it's really a centralized system for everybody within that organization to provide feedback on interviews, to review candidates. They use it for communications as well. For instance, I use Greenhouse, others have used Workday, Lever. So it's really, not a monster per se. And let me get into what that means. So there's some myths out there that, you apply for a job, there's an automatic rejection. The ATS, the machine rejected you. I will say that, and I can't speak on behalf of every human being in recruiting, but I will tell you that the majority of the recruiters within the circle that I work with would not set that system up to just automatically reject people. What does happen is they will set a knockout question. So this could be typically not an open-ended question, but more of a yes or no. So are you authorized to work in the US? Do you have 4 years of experience using Java? So it will be a yes or no question. Depending upon that answer is going to be a requirement for the job. So if you feel that you are applying to jobs and boom, getting an auto rejection, most likely it was due to a knockout question that company had set up to help basically, I want to say, weed in and weed out the applicants that are coming through that are meeting the requirements that are necessary for the role, right? So working in government, I know OFCCP compliance, that there is a requirement for people that need to have for federal roles X amount years of experience. So if you are not meeting that, the government cannot move you forward in particular roles with years of experience. And also when we talk about ATS compliant resume, I've heard ATS friendly, however you want to put that. Again, most ATSs, you're submitting your resume, you're uploading a document. I know for me, I have access to actually looking at the document when I review an applicant. So whether that's in Word or PDF format. Also, when you're uploading that, I think when we talk about compliance, we're talking about parsing, right? So how that information from your resume is parsing and being put into fields of your applicant file, which sometimes you can see that in real time when you're uploading it. It processes and spits your information out. That's really what compliancy means for the most part, is making sure that your information is in the system. Usually you can go in and edit that and make sure that the information is in there correctly. All right, I'm moving on here. I want to make sure I cover everything. I am going to talk about cover letter, and I think that this is another thing where, is it relevant? People ask me all the time, do I need to write a cover letter? I personally do not read them. I think typically more hiring managers are going to be more likely to read them than recruiters, especially for small businesses. And I think it depends upon, large organizations where you have recruitment teams who are sorting through resumes. Recruiters aren't going to be reading the cover letter. I think for smaller businesses, if the hiring managers are touching that process, they might have the likelihood of maybe reading that a little bit more often than recruiters. I will say maybe process-wise, if you have an opportunity where you are submitting your resume and application through email, this is a great way where you can include a cover letter or just content in the context of the email itself. That is the cover letter itself. So that's a situation where I would highly recommend writing a general cover letter, is if you are emailing somebody directly. Also, is to make sure in the job description, I know some companies have been a little bit tricky lately in trying to catch people. There might be fine print where it says a cover letter is required. If it says it's required, I would highly recommend that you include a cover letter in that, just because it shows that you follow directions, right? So if the directions ask for that, include it. Career pivots, or if you have a career gap, this could be a good opportunity to provide what led you from A to B. And I think something to take away too is I'm also, and I think this came up too about addressing career gaps, is I like being able to address the elephant in the room for everything, because otherwise you are risking that the reader, whether that be a recruiter, a hiring manager, is going to make assumptions of, you know, what you were doing in the career gap, or what was happening here, or why did they do that? I mean, assumptions, unfortunately, are going to be made. So to get ahead of that, I would strongly advise of, you know, including a, if you did have a career gap for whatever reason. I mean, I have something on my LinkedIn that shows I was out of work as a stay-at-home mom for a year. So I plug that in. It can be for caregiving, sabbaticals. You don't need to give a lot of information, right? So if it's something very private to you, it could be for health reasons, whatever you're comfortable with, first of all. I wouldn't advise anybody to do anything that they're not comfortable with, but certainly include maybe just a quick explanation of filling in the gap with it. And also, some people are consulting, some people are volunteering. So there's different ways to go about that. But I would, again, be sure to get ahead of any assumptions that are made. Even if there are short stints due to layoffs, I like to see people include that in a resume, because again, it gets ahead of somebody who's thinking, well, they're a job hopper. Include the reasons why certain things happen. So hopefully people won't be excluding you from opportunities based on the assumptions they've been made. So, and I'm a big fan. I don't know if anybody in the audience is using AI. Would love to see in the chat if anybody has been using AI, generative AI, for anything job related for resume writing or cover letters. I'm actually going to include a couple, checking the time, couple ideas for cover letters here that show some ideas around things that just stood out for me. These are just a couple ideas here about cover letters. So one thing, if you can do it, and LinkedIn is a great tool for research, but if you can actually, instead of to whom it concerns, can you go find the hiring manager on LinkedIn? And even if you're wrong, I think it's going to be, you know, if you missed, maybe it was the VP when really it was the director. But if you can find their name, I love to include dear, you know, Mr. Joe or whoever it might be. It shows that you did some research there and it might make you stand out. So if you can do some legwork and maybe take a guess at who the hiring manager is, try and address that in the cover letter. I love a strong hook, right? And I think thinking about AI, I love generative AI. I honestly do. It's a tool that should be used in resume writing, cover letter, you know, checking for grammatical errors, but do not use this for full dependency. It absolutely needs to be edited. And so if we're thinking about using generative AI for cover letters to give you a good foundation, which is fine, I would strongly advise going in and wiping out, unless you're using some great prompts, but start with a really strong hook right from the start of a cover letter that's really going to bring the reader in, right? So thinking about this too in cover letters is, again, getting back to the same theme with resume writing is, and while you might find some compassionate hiring managers that are really thrilled that, you know, this position is aligned because it's fulfilling your life passion of working in, you know, the gaming industry. That's great. Like, people love to see passion, but also, why you? Why should they hire you? Everybody probably has a passion for gaming or social impact work. So if you could tie in how you can solve their problem, maybe you worked at a company before where you were able to solve that problem, include that in the cover letter. Show that, listen, I've done this before, I can come in and do it again. Is a great way to kind of start a cover letter and show them, if it's not on the resume. And again, thinking about the information that you can include that was not found on the resume in a cover letter, which is why I love a cover letter for career pivots and for gaps as well, which might explain a little bit if that information is not in the resume. And I actually pulled two examples here. This was off of HubSpot has a whole, and I should drop it in the chat. They had a whole crowdsourced idea of about 40 different cover letters, and you know, you'll find whichever vibes with you. This one, again, is kind of getting back to how you're solving their problem, right? So what I liked, and I circled it, in this current position, and it shows, you know, this is what I've done. Action 1, 2, and 3, commitment to solving whatever the business need might be. So looking at the job description and maybe understanding, you know, what project that they have, which sometimes can be hard to determine in a job description. But if you can figure out maybe why you're being hired for that role, and then again, listing off, well, I did this at this company, and being able to give solid examples as to why would be a great example of some information that you can put in a cover letter that's different, that stands out from the typical generic cover letter you might see from everybody else. All right. I see a question to come up about a pivot or a gap. This is an example of something I found as far as kind of a general idea, and it's almost like a narrative, right, of telling your story about, well, I was here and, went through this experience, use these skills, and it's about transferable skills, right? Because when we're making a career pivot, if you can use those transferable skills to plug into your current target role, fantastic. But this kind of gives an outline of telling the story about somebody who's looking to pivot from, I believe that they were in emergency services and looking to transfer over into more of a UX program. So this kind of highlights in a cover letter a little bit about what that transition looks like, what their motivation is, and why they're looking to move into UX. So this maybe gives you an example of a career pivot and how that can provide value as a cover letter as well. Let's see, what else do I have here? I do want to leave some time for questions. And I know I had asked about AI prompts, and I don't know how many of you are using AI. Again, it's a great tool. ChatGPT, Perplexity is a great one to use as well. Claude, Gemini. So there's a lot of tools. Most of them are all free that you can use. You will, if you've never used them before, you'll have to start playing around with the prompts to kind of test your different outputs. But I had included a couple different AI prompts here that you might want to try to just test and see what comes out of the outputs, right? As far as just a basic cover letter. I mean, especially for jobs that are requiring cover letters, it takes a while, right? To have to sit and draft a cover letter. So again, if you can put a prompt in that's going to give you a solid foundation, and then for you to be able, maybe in that first paragraph, to go infuse something really personal that aligns, any experiences that you've had. For instance, if you're taking a look at a company and really maybe taking a look at their mission and values, if there's any, social responsibility, I mean, commitment to DEI, if, you had worked in pharma and they had done this work. I mean, I even remember working with a company, and she had come from a farming background, grew up at a farm, and a client I was working with was supporting Purdue. And it was something that was really unique that she had highlighted as, I grew up on a farm and, have experience here. And that actually stood out to him because she would be coming in and supporting Purdue. So there's always these really unique experiences that somebody might have that might really stand out to the client for whatever reason. So just thinking about, and again, kind of getting back to AI prompts, it could save you some time. I'd encourage you, if you have some time, to play around with it and just see if it could save you some time. But again, my key with anything related to AI is just make sure you're going in and, editing and proofreading to make sure that the information is correct, and that it's authentic and true to you. I think that's it for me. So I am more than open to taking questions. I am going to, I know a lot came through in the chat here, so let me run through here. I understand for years that cover letters and resumes should be short and to the point. Employers don't have time or interest to read lengthy letters and resumes. They're sifting through many resumes. Yeah, I mean, I will say this too, is that, as an uptick of tools out here that are, and even with LinkedIn, right, there's easy apply. So it's making it easier, as well as with software tools, for people to just shoot off resumes everywhere, right? So recruiters are experiencing a higher volume of applicants. So there is that a lot of recruiters are having to go through. And I think, as we're talking about companies that might be putting more friction in their process, whether that be more open-ended questions or knockout questions to help combat some of these higher volume of applicants. My tip also with that is, if you have the flexibility and openness to look at companies within proximity, start within, I know, we're within the Boston area here, but I think if you can start, within your area, look at small businesses. I mean, I'm a small business advocate here, but start looking at not the big players, right? Like everybody's going after Spotify and Amazon, or, all the big names. Everybody wants to go work for the same companies. Look at the different companies that might be experiencing lower volume. And, again, starting with proximity, even if those companies are fully remote, then it might still be just good to start within that area as well and work your way out. Let's see. In a career pivot where my volunteer experience is more relevant to the position, how would you suggest? So I would say with the volunteer experience, if that is going to be more relevant, I do see this with a lot of people, even with boot camps, right? And again, my wheelhouse is technology, so I'm being a little bit more relevant in that area. But I've seen a lot of people where this is the exception of putting your education, your volunteer experience up top. If you are making a career pivot or if it's just entry level. So highlighting, even if you're coming out of school, and I'll see people years of experience still listing their coursework. I'm like, listen, if you've got 5 years of experience, delete your coursework. You have professional experience to substitute for that. But if you're just starting a new career, include that in the beginning of your resume, because that's initially what the hiring manager or recruiter will be looking at. So definitely lead with volunteer experience or anything relevant, as you said, that's going to be tying into that new position that you're targeting. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to go opinion with T letters. I don't know if I'm familiar with T letters, Christina. If you can drop a little explanation of what that might be, I will try and address that for you. How would you describe the why behind a pivot or a gap, especially when you can't? So it depends, right? So a pivot, I think the why behind a pivot is really like, what is your why for your pivot, right? There must have been something that motivated you to leave this particular, teaching is a great example right now. Everybody's leaving teaching, and well, not everybody. We need our teachers. Shout out to the teachers. You're fantastic. Please, I don't want to teach my kids. But we are seeing a mass exodus of teaching, even nursing. So I would say that, for whatever reason, I don't think you have to give into a huge explanation of why you're looking to leave. But I am seeing a lot of different careers where they are looking to pivot. So it's okay to just maybe not dwell so much on what you're running away from, but more what you're running to, if that makes sense. As far as a gap, again, there's different reasons for gaps, right? Caregiving, whether that's for your children or whether that's for, seniors, leave it very vague. I don't think, listen, people are people and will ask very unethical things, but hopefully, again, people won't get into too much detail about, why you were out for healthcare reasons, for childcare reasons, whatever it might be, even if you were laid off and out of work. The past 4 years have been very volatile. Again, coming from tech, it's been up and down. So layoffs have been very common now, hopefully less of a stigma than what it was 10 years ago. But I think, again, if you're addressing that right off the bat, that you're getting over any assumptions that somebody's making. Let's see, I think, sorry, I'm dropping down. T-letter lists the company's responsibilities on the left, how the candidate matches up on the right. Oh, okay, interesting. I'm gonna have to go look that up, Christina. I don't know if I've ever seen a T letter before. Okay, thank you for that, Christina. I'll have to get back to you, and then maybe find me and connect with me on LinkedIn, which I can drop my LinkedIn. Actually, let me do that now, y'all. I'll drop this here if you all want to come find me. Bear with me here. When asked to submit a cover letter and resume,
can I interrupt, Kelly? Kelly, when you type things in the chat, make sure you're addressing them to everyone and not hosts and panelists. Otherwise, only you and I see it. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. I will do that. When asked to submit, sorry, I'm just running through the questions as best as I can here. Include the dates for the career gap. Yes, I would. And again, I wish I had an example too, but if there's, a time, and again, if it was most recent or if it was, 10 years ago might be irrelevant. I'm thinking probably in the most recent 5 years of experience, if there was a career gap. And again, getting ahead of any assumptions that people might make. But I would just put a general, even if it's in years, but yes, include if it's months or months or years, to include that in the resume. Okay, yeah, I think I just addressed that throughout your resume. Can you use years instead of months and years throughout your resume to minimize gaps? I've seen the strategy before. I don't know how I feel about it. I think that certainly during an interview process, now whether that interviewer dwells or asks upon it, it's hard to say, right? Because everybody interviews differently. I mean, I think background check, as long as your information is consistent, your LinkedIn and your resume match up, and that you're being honest during the interview process, I think that's okay. I think as long as you're not giving misinformation during your interview process about, if it does come up, about months and years, then it's okay, is what I'm going to go with. Okay. Let me include the dates. Okay, let me ask to submit. Sorry, I'm looking through here. When asked to submit cover letter and resume via email, would you as a recruiter love to see in the actual email, subject and body, deliver those attachments? Yeah, I would love to see that in email. I know that there's even some outreach, some information. Should I be following up with the recruiter or hiring manager after I've applied to a job online? I think as long as you keep it concise, if it's a large company and you're referencing maybe a job with a particular, if it has a reference number to it, because some recruiters are slammed, especially in large organizations, if you can include a URL or reference to the job. I am in the mindset as a recruiter that I am very susceptible to rejection, so I'm calloused at this point, but I don't see any harm in reaching out to a recruiter or hiring manager just to let them know, hey, listen, I submitted my job here. This is the work I've been doing. This is why I'm a fit. Keep it concise, right? So if you can do a couple bullet points about this is what I'm doing, this is why I think I'm a fit, here's my resume, it won't hurt. The worst that could happen is they don't respond. So if you are feeling really strongly about your fit, I don't see that there would be anything terrible about the follow-up. I have a couple of publications on my resume. One has a very long list of authors. It's possible the hiring manager would know some of them, so I feel like it's a good thing, but it takes up a lot of space. So, I mean, that's interesting, right? Because I do see, especially in science, data science, the medical field, whether it be patents, publications, I think that that's common. So I would, keep it as concise as you can, but I think that that's okay to keep. It's something very common in that field. So I would, versus editing the reference, I would keep the publications there. As far as an actual reference, again, not the biggest fan, but I would include those publications in there. I don't know if I answered that correctly or not. Apply via LinkedIn or apply via company website. Apply on the website. Listen, people do get hired on LinkedIn. People get hired on Easy Apply, but my only argument for applying to the company website is that it is more likely to be integrated into their ATS, whereas LinkedIn might not have that integration with the company's internal ATS. So go to the company website. Also, another tip here is look at company websites for job openings. I can't tell you how many times I've looked through LinkedIn where jobs have not been posted on LinkedIn because people probably do not want to pay for the ads, but there's jobs on the company website job opening page. So, which is also a good place to put Google alerts. So when jobs are opening on the company website, you'll get notifications about when they're opening up positions. But yes, keep your eye on company websites as opposed to just Indeed and LinkedIn. Let's see, after I respond, you've done a lot. When I have 3 careers, educator, banker, administrator, of clear themes, and how could I respond to this? So just make sure, and it's okay, like people, listen, careers are not linear now. So I think it's very common to see people who, go through different careers too. As you said, that there's a clear theme of relationship development. So what I would recommend you do is to kind of keep it high level. And again, I don't know what type of jobs that you are applying to. So I might be able to provide a little bit more context there if I was more aware and give you advice on resume writing, but certainly make sure that you're highlighting under each of like banker, administrator, and higher education, that you're highlighting those relationship development under each of those experiences. Reference another. Oh, no, yes. No, that's good. Keep that. Sorry, Pam, keep all of that on there. Thank you for that clarification. Is it okay to apply to multiple jobs at the same company? I think that that's fine. I mean, it's certainly, of course, it depends upon what the company is. I mean, I'll give Amazon as an example because I do know a couple of recruiters that work there. I mean, they have access to see where you've applied internally too, but as long as the positions are very much aligned. I mean, if you're applying to positions that are all over the place, that's kind of a red flag as far as, well, this person doesn't have clarity in terms of their area of expertise. So as long as the roles are relevant to your experience, then yes, that is okay. Love LinkedIn, my job search is confidential. I can't openly solicit my job search. So I think you can use LinkedIn. I understand from a confidentiality standpoint that you should probably not be using the open to work banner, right? Especially on the public setting, because that's, publicly stating that you're open to work. I would start, and again, it depends on how comfortable you are with, if you are passive and looking to explore options within your network, if there are trusted first degree contacts who would maintain that confidentiality. My first recommendation to anybody, if you're starting to explore your options in a job search, is to start tapping into those people who can vouch for your skill sets, right? So whether that's people that you've worked with, former bosses, mentors, if there are even from an academia setting or people from school that you worked with, touch base with them. They're going to be your strongest advocates, right? So and people that you trust that will hopefully keep your job search confidential. So start with those first degree contacts first. All right, let's see. I might have missed some more up here. Anybody else have any questions? Things that I missed? I'm trying to scroll up to the top here. Let me look in Q&A. I'm a physical therapist, took 15 years, stayed home as a mom that took an admin job unrelated. I would like to change professions. Recommendations on what I should focus on. I would first say, what do you want to do? It's hard for me, and I do get this question all the time, is, do you have any jobs that fit me? And if I don't know your background or your strengths or your interests, it's really hard for me to make recommendations. So I would suggest going back to my first step in the process of clarity. And sometimes a career coach can help with this. I do know that I think, is it What Color Is My Parachute has been recommended to me as far as kind of working through that process. Strengths Finders, I think. I knew I had the book somewhere. Here it is. Strength Finders. This is a good book to go through, maybe just to identify like what your strengths are too. So maybe you can align it. Of course, if you have transferable skills, use that to, when you're formulating a resume to market yourself to those different roles. But maybe just think about, again, what kind of interests do you have? And then start from there in terms of exploring, do some informational interviews, talk to people who might be willing to tell you a little bit about their career path, maybe talk to former physical therapists who maybe got into a different work too. And maybe they'll have some advice on some different career paths that worked for them. Or message this. Can we put landlord experience? Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the type of responsibilities for being a landlord, absolutely. I mean, I think anything where you can pull out anything that you've accomplished that's going to be relevant. I mean, I see, working in a restaurant on resumes all the time. I mean, I'm former hospitality, so I think there's a lot of transferable skills there, but I think that you can pull any particular skill sets. And actually, to be honest with you, again, generative AI will help you formulate ideas of, what type of skills might I have developed as a landlord that would be transferable to whatever job that you're targeting, right? So generative AI can be a great tool to use for brainstorming if you're just stumped and can't really think about, even transforming some of your task written resume bullets. Put a prompt in. Can you help me formulate ideas on what results might have come from this task? And it will spit out a bunch of results. So use that. Again, you have to make it relevant and specific to your actual results, but it can help with the brainstorming part of it.
So Kelly, I'm good if you're good. I think we
Okay.
got to at least I'm going to say 95% of the questions and comments, and we have gone a little bit past 3 o'clock. So like I said, I'm good if you're good. Folks, let's give Kelly a big virtual round of applause for a job well done. You'll all receive the recording and the chat from me tomorrow. When you exit the Zoom in a minute, make sure to fill out the feedback survey that pops up. That'll be greatly appreciated. We're off next week. In 2 weeks, on Monday the 21st at 2 o'clock, we're going to have, and let me pull this up because I don't have it memorized, insider insights on the white-collar job market. And that is going to be with career coach and resume writer Tegan Bartos. So I'm not sure if you all, you know Tegan, Kelly? I don't know if you all know each other.
Yeah, she's great. Don't miss that one, y'all.
Yeah. So Kelly, any last words from you before we wrap it up?
I tried to address everything, but everything is nuanced. So I did drop my LinkedIn profile there. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, you need support. I have a circle of people who are specialists in different areas too. So, let me know how I can help support you in this job search. And thank you for coming and hanging out for an hour. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you all. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.